The town of Graymore lay blanketed in an eerie silence. It was the kind of quiet that didn't just fill the streets, but crept into the minds of its residents, leaving them restless. Tonight, something felt wrong. An inexplicable tension hung in the air. Then, without warning, a sound pierced the stillness. Faint drum beats and the shrill of a whistle, as if a carnival had come to town. But Graymore hadn't seen a carnival in decades. Curious faces peeked out of windows as an old, rusted gate appeared at the edge of town, seemingly out of nowhere. Above the gate, a sign flickered to life with the words, "Welcome to the Silent Carnival. Enter if you dare." From within, soft lights shimmered, and a strange, haunting tune seemed to echo, not through the air, but directly in the minds of those nearby. Drawn by an irresistible pull, townsfolk gathered at the gate, their curiosity outweighing their caution. As they stepped through, they found themselves in a surreal world. A place where nothing felt real, yet everything was vividly alive. The air seemed to hum with excitement and dread in equal measure. Would you dare to step further into the Silent Carnival? As more people ventured into the carnival, the gates behind them creaked closed with a heavy thud, as if sealing them in. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, yet the eerie carnival lights flickered invitingly. The silence, which had once been a peaceful characteristic of Graymore, now seemed unnatural, oppressive even. The usual sounds of the town, the rustle of leaves or distant chatter, had vanished entirely. In their place, a soft whisper seemed to float through the air, like voices carried by the wind. But when you tried to listen closely, there was nothing, just an empty, creeping sense of unease. The carnival grounds stretched endlessly, and yet it felt like there was no real end to them. Only more lights, more stalls, more strange and mysterious figures moving just out of sight. In the center of the carnival, a large tent loomed, its entrance obscured by a thick mist. The air around it seemed to vibrate with a strange energy, pulling the townsfolk toward it like moths to a flame. Inside the tent, the atmosphere was even more unnerving. The lights inside flickered, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. A figure dressed in a black suit and top hat appeared out of nowhere, standing silently at the far end of the tent. His eyes gleamed in the dim light, but he did not speak. Instead, he extended a hand toward the crowd, beckoning them forward. Would you trust this figure and follow him into the shadows, or would you turn back to the unknown horrors lurking behind you? The townsfolk, despite their unease, found themselves drawn toward the mysterious figure. It was as though an invisible force was guiding their feet, urging them to follow. The whispering voices, now louder and clearer, seemed to come from all around them, but they couldn't make out the words, only the sense of urgency, as if something important awaited them at the end of the tent. The figure in the top hat remained still, his hand outstretched, a silent invitation to step closer. As the first few people hesitantly moved forward, the others followed, their steps slow but sure. The moment their feet crossed the threshold of the tent, a shiver ran down their spines. The air had grown colder, and the mist seemed to thicken around them, swallowing the edges of their vision. The lights above flickered, casting strange, distorted shadows that made it impossible to know where the edges of reality began, and the carnival's illusions took over. When they finally reached the figure, he smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Welcome," he said, his voice echoing oddly in the silence, "to the heart of the carnival." The words hung in the air for a moment before he motioned toward a large, ornate mirror standing at the center of the room. The glass seemed to shimmer, but there was something off about it, something wrong. It didn't reflect the people standing in front of it. Instead, it showed a dark, twisting hallway, its walls lined with carnival games, but none of them were in the same place they had just passed. It was a different carnival, a darker, more twisted version of the one they had entered. "Step forward," the man in the top hat instructed, his voice carrying an unsettling authority. "The real carnival begins now." The crowd was frozen, unsure of what to do. Some felt the magnetic pull of the mirror. Others were paralyzed by fear. Would they follow this stranger, walking deeper into the unknown, or would they turn and run, hoping to escape the nightmare they had unwittingly entered? Would you dare to cross the threshold of that mirror, or would you run from the horrors waiting on the other side? A tense silence fell over the crowd, each person caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Some were paralyzed by fear, their hearts racing as the image in the mirror seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Others, however, felt an irresistible pull toward it, as though it were calling them into a deeper, darker part of the carnival, one that promised answers, or perhaps more questions. The figure in the top hat stood motionless, his smile never wavering, watching them intently as if he knew exactly what each person was thinking. The longer they stood there, the more the carnival around them seemed to fade into the background. The lights dimmed, the sounds grew muffled, and it was as if they had become trapped in a liminal space, a place that existed between reality and nightmare. One by one, the townsfolk began to step forward, their feet moving almost of their own accord. It was as though they had no choice but to follow, as though the mirror had claimed them. The first person to cross the threshold into the mirror was a woman in a red scarf. As she stepped through, the mirror rippled like water, and her body vanished from view. Her absence sent a chill through the group, and whispers rippled among the crowd. But still, one by one, they followed. The mirror swallowed them whole, each person disappearing without a trace until only a handful remained. The last to step forward was a young man, his face pale with fear, but his eyes burning with curiosity. He hesitated for a moment, staring into the mirror, which now seemed to shimmer more intensely, as if beckoning him. The carnival lights flickered, casting brief, frantic shadows across the tent. Finally, with a deep breath, he stepped forward, and just like the others, the mirror consumed him. In an instant, they were gone, and the mirror returned to its calm, reflective state, showing only the empty space where the carnival had once been. The figure in the top hat stood silently, watching the place where the last of the townsfolk had disappeared. His smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet satisfaction. The show must go on, he muttered to himself, turning away from the now empty tent. The Silent Carnival had claimed its latest victims, and no one would ever know what horrors lay beyond the mirror's surface. What would you have done if you were one of them? Would you have stepped into the mirror, or would you have fled before it was too late? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales from the Silent Carnival.